2 essays on generative AI. Hello, patrons and general audience members. Welcome to a 2-part reading of Some Books That Burn essays by Robin. Thank you to Case Aiken, who receives a monthly patron shoutout. These 2 essays are both about my thoughts on generative AI, but neither was long enough to be an episode on its own. As a reviewer of books, I'm very concerned with the news and societal reception of the resource-guzzling plagiarism machine, especially when indie authors are among those most immediately harmed by having their work stolen and struggling to stand out in a sea of AI-generated slush flooding the ebook market. While I understand that there are useful versions of AI which aren't used to push out garbage no one actually wants to read, the existence of that particular firehose does need to be addressed. With that out of the way, please enjoy my reading of 2 essays about generative AI. The problem is not that you want what generative AI promised. The problem is that they lied about whether it could deliver. I've been seeing a lot of anti-AI sentiment which blames people for wanting what generative AI promised, but never actually intended to deliver. These assertions tend to ignore that it was and remains entirely reasonable to want a lot of things that the people promoting generative AI keep insisting it can do. The problem isn't that people are bad for wanting these things, but that it doesn't actually work most of the time, and that when it does so by stealing other people's work and by requiring water and power in quantities which are contributing to climate change and the destruction of the environment. What do you mean you can't write an email? It's not ableist to be against generative AI, a thing which is expensive, resource-intensive, and doesn't actually do most of what it's marketed as being able to do. It is frequently ableist to assert that anyone who wants any of what it promises is bad for doing so. As someone with a cognitive disability which puts a 30% pass filter on my writing, yeah, I actually would and do benefit from something that guesses my next word when I'm writing a work email. Every little bit that I draft while picking from a binary tree of options lets me write without forgetting as many of the pieces. I make templates for myself of text I'll need more than once, with highlighting so I don't forget to address someone by name or say thanks. I use text-to-speech and then clean up the rampant spelling errors and incorrect guesses in the transcription. I read things out loud to myself and to other people to find where I had the idea when I was typing, but my brain didn't let it get out in the moment, and it takes several more reviews to figure out what I missed. When having parallel conversations with friends, I copy and paste from one message thread to another, using my own words repeatedly instead of typing them anew. I go away, I come back later, I dictate incoherent paragraphs, and then tease them into something resembling the complicated thought I had in my head, which dysgraphia stripped down into a vague idea that there was enough to fill a list. I'm sure there was. I write things out of order because I don't know in the moment what the full structure will be in the end, except that the best I can do, even with all these compensating strategies, is 80% of what I wanted. But it's better than 30%, or than giving up when I see something someone wrote and I want to say more, I want to respond to it, but I don't have the spoons. They turn to sieves in my hands, and everything I wanted to say fades, shattering into pieces that don't feel worthwhile. Emojis, GIFs, and memes make things easier. A single symbol is a whole concept, decompressing some of what dysgraphia crumpled. Except if I post an image, it needs alt text, requiring writing at the very moment that I'm least able to do so. This isn't negotiable either, because just as I need the accessibility of reaching for a meme to say more than nothing, blind or low vision users deserve the reciprocal courtesy if at all possible. Even there, a meme is better than nothing because I don't have to describe the whole shape of my reaction when I can say that it's the surprised Pikachu meme with a certain label, or the "is this a butterfly" meme with a twist. Even if they don't know what it looks like, they'll know or can learn just as I did what it means. When people say that no one wants predictive text or to have something write a paragraph for them or that they're bad for wanting those things, that's just not true. Something that offers up generic email language for your generic office email, drawing solely from the hundreds of thousands of previous generic office emails it has, that thing is useful. Autocorrect, where you can adjust your personal settings to tell it you do really swear that much, or that a specific word isn't a misspelling and you do want it added to your computer's personal dictionary, or even templates online that give you the format and language examples for a specific kind of formal letter that most people only write a few times a decade at most. These are useful things that people aren't bad for wanting. Templates, models, resources, examples, drafting guides, they existed before if you knew where to look. Generative AI and models like ChatGPT appeared, backed by grifters and con artists, to promise people who didn't know where to look that all they needed to do was write a few words and press a button. We weren't bad for wanting it to be real. Generative AI is ruining the tools which used to help me with accessibility. The things I used to use to help me are getting worse because they were made for specific scenarios and worked fine, but now they're getting replaced or melded with something that doesn't understand context and isn't proscriptively bound in lieu of that understanding. My generic work email isn't improved by drawing from everything ever said on Reddit. Predictive text, which pulls from everyone instead of what I write frequently, no longer knows how to spell my last name. It offers that perhaps I meant Robin Hood instead of myself. Putting generative AI into formally useful tools and ruining search engines with incoherent text that mimics the average internet post doesn't help in a reliable way. The only thing it does reliably is steal and pollute. The easiest way to not sound average is to ask the black box to copy someone in particular, doubling down on its thievery. It's okay if you have trouble sending that email. You're not bad for wanting something that would help you. But ChatGPT and its various clones and embeds aren't that help. A reflection on path-dependent processes. I've always made things with my hands. I find it physically soothing and mentally intriguing. I've also never been able to imagine things I hadn't already seen. The combination of these two facets of myself, even before I realized them as an adult, is that my creative efforts have focused intensely on various kinds of mimicry. As a kid, I made geometric patterns and followed templates from the iron-on bead kits. It uses a pattern on a special board with pins, and then the back is heated with an iron to fuse the beads into a pixelated image. I've done sand images, layered sand in tiny bottles, and color by number. In my oven-baked clay phase in elementary school, I made copies of objects from my bedroom, such as a laptop computer and a tiny hermit crab which fit into a real shell. I still have a clay sculpture I made 20 years ago of my grandmother's cat, now a decade in the grave. I looked at the world around me and made tiny models that captured ephemeral moments. In high school, I started making duct tape reproductions of whatever someone wanted me to affix in brightly colored adhesive. I made three-dimensional sculptures, reproductions of paintings, and custom art based on reference images. I figured out a scale from taking a printout of the image and scaling it up, measuring precisely using rulers and T-squares. I made several items for my youngest sibling, such as a duct tape companion to his beloved blue dog. The duct tape rendition was dubbed Purple Dog. Throughout my duct tape era, which remains the longest of my creative eras, though book reviewing and hand sewing are slowly vying for the title, various people, usually older male relatives of mine, questioned why I did what I did in my chosen manner when there were other ways to get the end result. One questioned why I used duct tape. Surely, since duct tape is just adhesive with a cloth layer and a plastic layer on top, it would be easy to make my painting reproductions by slathering a canvas with adhesive and then putting some sort of plastic over it. Another said I would sell more of my creations if I duplicated my skill, teaching other people what I did, taking commissions, outsourcing the work to my lackeys, and then raking in the cash. Other than telling them I preferred to use duct tape and I wanted to do it myself, I didn't have a great answer. I knew they were wrong, but I didn't know how to express it. Something I didn't know how to say back then, but my then in process engineering degree would teach me later, is that the disconnect is I viewed what I did as path dependent processes, almost to the degree where I didn't care about the end result precisely, but I cared how I went about it. I enjoyed making all the little copies of my corner of the world, but once they were made, I didn't always know what to do with them. Selling them or making them on commission in the first place wasn't because I wanted to make money from my creations. It was because if I just kept them, I'd have to figure out what to do with them. But if I sold them, they got out of my way and I could use the money to buy more materials. I wasn't doing all this just to churn out art and make the pieces exist. I was making them to have had the experience of their creation. Because I enjoyed the calm and structure of measuring precisely, unrolling tape, and listening to the as I flung my arms wide and didn't let the roll twist in my hands. I could rip tape precisely for hours. I was proud of the way I spent hundreds of hours working with tape and never used scissors, instead subtly layering each piece so that they were big enough to adhere, but exactly the right layer was visible on top in the end. It wasn't just adhesive and plastic, it was a visceral feeling of precision made manifest. It also was, in many ways, a forgiving medium, something I desperately needed as my then unknown dysgraphia messed with me in subtle ways. I could place a piece of tape, see it, know it was in the wrong place, and then reposition it, or peel it off and replace it with a different piece. Few mistakes were irreversible, and I would spend hours or even days working with tape listening to music. Why would I take that from myself? I wouldn't, because it was about the path and the process as much or more than the end result. I did teach other people how to work with tape if they wanted, but most people didn't care to do it themselves. That's what I was for, and that's okay. The people who wanted me to give up the whole reason for doing it just to make there be a little more of it, or more money in my pocket for very little work, didn't understand that how I got there was important. People who advocate for AI art don't seem to understand that even when the art is mimicry, the point is expressed in the process of creation as much or more than the final object or image. And frankly, on a personal level, as someone who thrives on the art of mimicry and caricature, of paying homage to prior art by capturing a new facet of it in the mirror of my regard, the twisted spew of a plagiarism machine makes mockery of everything sacrificed to feed it. The journey matters to the destination. If it didn't, you could just look at the final page of a book and know everything important about it. As a reviewer, AI makes it harder to find the next book I'll love. As a writer, AI can't learn from the prose it synthesizes. As a mimic, AI fails over and over to portray anything new or interesting from the works it stole. It lacks even the talent of a forger, while its prompters and proponents claim to be the real artists. Art, whether physical, audible, digital, or some other medium, is an expression of the time that a person took to make something and put it into the world. This is why collaborative art pieces where the artist writes directions and the audience participates are just as much art as any painting on canvas. The people who asked why I didn't just turn my tape into an exploitative factory or cover canvases with adhesive asked because they didn't care about the process and didn't understand why I do.